Okay. I think everyone now has been muted, which is great. I introduced myself as people were calling in, but just very quickly, my name is Briana. I'm the director of the Jewish Teen Funders Network. Welcome to our fall kickoff call, and as Danielle shared earlier, this is a great opportunity for anybody who's new to the role, who has a new program, or who's just thinking about Jewish teen philanthropy. I'll caution that today we're going to do a quick overview, and we're going to talk about some basics. And my hope is that for anyone on the call who has a pre-established program or for whom it's your first year, some of these questions may be answered and some of them may be new. And my hope is that you'll at least take away one new thing to think about. I'll voice this again at the end of our call, but please know that we don't think we can teach you everything there is to know about Jewish teen philanthropy in 20 minutes. So we're a resource here. We have a wealth of information, both online and in this fantastic team. And we're here to dig deeper into any one of these areas. So today we'll do a big overview and give you some food for thought, some things to percolate and questions to keep thinking about and considering. And then in partnership, we're here to help you as you establish and continue on your program. So let's dive right in. Hopefully everyone can see the slides. So like I shared today, we are going to start with the big picture. We're going to share our view from the field of Jewish teen philanthropy, but then we'll very quickly move into what makes a program tick. We'll look at program component, the basics of what makes Jewish teen philanthropy programs Jewish teen philanthropy programs. Then we'll take a look at questions that you might want to answer, those considerations for your program. Like I said, JTFN has a wealth of resources, and this call is just a peek at what we're going to do and what we have to offer. And then the next steps will offer you some opportunities to think about where you might go and how you might take this idea or this program to the next level. The baseline, what is Jewish teen philanthropy? So we'll start just by defining our terms, because oftentimes one of my favorite books says words are a source of misunderstanding. And the reality is that sometimes we say things and not everybody knows what we're talking about. So what is Jewish about Jewish teen philanthropy? Really everything. It's the heart and the soul of the program. Teens are learning Jewish values, texts, and traditions that relate to giving. They'll unpack terms like tzedakah and tikkun olam and examine the different ways our responsibilities as Jews to give to our community. Or communities, because teens now are living in a multitude of communities. We'll talk about that. And ultimately, the teens are deciding what Jewish giving means to them, but through the lens of values, texts, and traditions. And then next, the teens. When we focus our work at JTFN, we really focus in on teens 13 to 18 years old. Teen philanthropy programs that are part of our network generally serve post-b'nai mitzvah students all the way through high school. There are some programs that work with teens during their bar or bat mitzvah years, but for the most part, we're going to focus on teen philanthropy programs that are substantive engagement programs for teens who are just slightly older. Of course, I think this model works in a variety of ages, and I actually encourage teens who participate at a younger age or programs who offer teen philanthropy for a younger age of teens to offer something again later, because as we know, teens change a lot between 13, 15, 17, 18. One thing that makes this program especially attractive to teens and especially successful is that we're teaching both tools of philanthropy and tactics. So we're giving teens the opportunity to learn a new skill and the playground to try it out and to make real decisions. And that's where the philanthropy comes in. We are talking about giving real money to real organizations. Every one of our programs, as part of the network, does that. They engage in a real formal grant-making process, and that guides the work, and that is the lens in which we engage teens. It's a real opportunity to make a difference, and it's oftentimes one of the first times they've had this responsibility. So that's the basic, that's the overview of what do we mean when we say Jewish teen and philanthropy. But let's actually dive a little bit deeper and talk a little bit about what a teen foundation is and what a teen foundation is not. So teen foundations, and I'll just back up by saying JTFN, the Jewish Teen Funders Network, supports a multitude of programs that engages 13 to 18-year-olds in grant making through a Jewish lens. Some of those programs are based on individual giving, and we know that some people watching this have that lens and that focus. Many of our programs focus on what we call a teen foundation, which is a collective giving model. We found more and more that the collective giving model leads to high levels of engagement and excitement among teens, because it's not only an individual process, but a community building process that they do with their peers. So we'll focus a lot of the conversation today on teen foundations, and know that should you have any questions about any of the models in which we support, please be in contact with us, and we're happy to work through those. So teen foundation is a great example of adult and teen partnership. These programs are generally adult facilitated, where teens are making the real decision. So adults are not making the grant making decisions. The decision making, everything from mission statement to where the money goes, is up to the teen. So real empowerment, but with real adults helping to guide the way. It is effective at engaging a diverse set of teens. We find that teens who have not found avenues to be engaged in Jewish communal life, and those who find themselves in the top leadership in their youth movements or synagogue, and everywhere in between, are excited and engaged in this work. And it's not only about engaging teens with capacity. It's a common misconception that Jewish teen philanthropy and Jewish teen foundations are really about engaging any Jewish teen in a study of what they care about and how they can make change in their community. It is a method, as I shared, of teaching practical tools with a hands-on opportunity to try them out. And it's not the same as volunteering with an organization. In this lens, we really focus on the teen as the grant maker, teen as a critical and thoughtful and helpful partner to organizations, and an opportunity for teens to learn about the wholeness of a field, the wholeness of issues in their community. So it's actually not the same as volunteering, where teens may have an amazing experience doing hands-on service, but it's a very different experience with the organization. And we find that that's a great thing in partnership with our work, as is advocacy, that these three, philanthropy, advocacy, hands-on service, they make up the world of Tikkun Olam, and we're focusing our slice of attention on philanthropy and on giving. And it is a model that your organization owns and iterates. It is something that JTFN does not come into your community and tell you exactly how you have to run a teen philanthropy program or exactly what to do. Rather, we are a source of learning, of sharing, of field growth and development. It's not something that that an educator or a facilitator could just pick up and run in and offer. Though we do have curriculum for people to use step by step, what we find is that it takes preparation and planning. It takes someone learning and owning every part of the curriculum, and we're here to be partners in that work and that development. We also found that it's not one size fits all, that every community who participates in Jewish teen philanthropy has their own perspective on what makes the program successful, what their focuses are, and that's what we'll dive into together. So that's the basic, that's the big picture. And as we transition into this next part of the presentation, you'll see that this is where we'll start to raise questions for you about why you are running a teen philanthropy program, what you want to get out of it, and how to make that happen for your teens. So there are a variety of goals that your program might set out to accomplish. One of the biggest pieces of feedback that we hear from program leaders in the field is that they just don't have enough time to do it all. That's okay. Actually, it kind of makes sense. Grant making and Jewish giving, it's not a one-time thing. It's not just something that you do and then never come back to again. It's a lifelong practice. People hone this skill over many, many years and many, many cycles of giving. The grant making here in Jewish Teen Philanthropy programs is a tool that we're using to accomplish teen outcomes in Jewish engagement and Jewish identity building. While most programs share similar long-term goals, like the ones listed here, that people who participated in teen philanthropy programs will later in life be more active philanthropically in the Jewish community, have long-term involvement and leadership in the Jewish community, that the short-term goals might be different in every program. And this is something that you'll want to consider from the very output of your program. What are our short-term goals for teens who participate in the program? So for example, a program that focuses on the short-term goal of philanthropic know-how might feel very different for teens, maybe more academic, than one that's focused on empowering teens as social justice change makers. Sure, in both examples, teens will learn through a grant-making process, but you might spend more time or less time digging into the nuances of giving, like operational versus program grants, or deeper analysis of financial systems, or methods for reporting and following up on grants. If your program's primary short-term outcome is to develop leadership skills or to be empowered as a social justice change maker, you might find that your focus is in giving teams the tools to make the grant decisions and to be grant makers, but really focus your activities on understanding different leadership skills that might come out of this: public speaking, consensus building, group dynamics, so things like that. So it's important for you as you start a program to consider what is the goal here for our teams and what might be the goal for our organization. I always encourage programs that are already running to really question this each cycle, each year, to think about what are we trying to accomplish here, and does our programming match those short-term goals. One thing that we do know about all of our programs is that regardless of your goal, regardless of your short-term outcomes for teens, the cycle that teens participate in is the same. Teens, and it's the same as grant makers and a foundation or a philanthropist think about. It starts with the need to think about your values, to understand what Jewish values guide your life, to learn about community need. Some of that is defining your community. As we said earlier, teens participate and live within multiple communities these days. And understanding what are the needs in my Jewish community, what are the needs in my local community or global community, and what are those Jewish values that guide who I am individually and what I'm bringing to the table. Now, because we're talking about a collective process, teen foundations typically start their year with that values clarification and community need assessment on an individual level, but then quickly move to deciding what this group cares about on a collective level. The development of mission statement is one of the core critical pieces of a teen foundation's journey. It guides the work, it names who's in the room, and it talks about what change they want to see in the world and how they're going to do that. Their mission statement will guide the rest of the sessions, identifying everything from which Jewish values guide this group to what need in the community or what cause in the community they want to address. Over the course of the next several months, weeks, or days, depending on how you outline your program, teens then dive into learning about what are nonprofits, how do they work, what's a foundation. They learn about grant making and they learn about the process that they're about to engage in. On this end, it's highly academic, but this is the runway in which they'll use to take off on their grant making. After understanding a little bit about how these organizations work and function, they, and perhaps you as a professional, will release the request for proposal. This is a request that's going to nonprofits that serve that same community need that's outlined in your mission statement, and hopefully whose organization's values align with your team's mission statement as well. I always recommend as a professional in this area that many programs suffer or struggle with getting the right proposals. And that's because organizations aren't necessarily looking for team groups. But I will say that the relationships that you as a professional build with nonprofits in your community is essential to getting great proposals for your teams to consider. Once your teams have received those proposals and have had a chance to read through them and understand what's on the table, what are the options, we always recommend site visits. The site visit is the one time in the cycle that looks the most like hands-on community service, but in reality is actually quite far away from that. On a site visit, it's an opportunity for teams to come in and meet with top representatives of the organization. Perhaps, if possible, to see the program that they're considering funding for in action, to ask questions, to dig into the proposal, to find out what does this practically look like? What will you do if you're not able to get the funding? What will you do if you got more funding? What are areas that you're working on? The site visit is really peeking behind the curtain of an organization. We find that professionals are most amazed by teams during these site visits and are very excited to share their work and their programs, and that teams love having the opportunity to get to interact. The site visits just add color to the proposals, just the words of the proposal. The next thing after teams have had an opportunity to interact, whether that be on in-person site visits or even a Skype or a virtual meeting with a representative from the organization, teams dive again into the consensus building process. And I say again because consensus building is a tool. It's not necessarily a milestone marker. In fact, teams have used consensus building earlier in the year when they developed their mission statement. We recommend that all team foundations utilize consensus building as a way of operating. It's a method that ensures that every single voice at the table is raised, that uses a process of suggesting an option, raising concerns, addressing those concerns, iterating the proposal, and getting to a place where everyone in your group feels okay, feels satisfied with what you have. It may not be everyone's first choice, but everyone's in agreement that it can move forward. This is an important foundation that we build, and it's actually often the first time that a team has been a part of a process where it's not just about one vote, but about every single voice. Setting the stage for that and using consensus building throughout your program, especially in mission statement development and in everything from narrowing down your proposals to deciding which organizations you go on site visits to ultimately making your final decision. Ensure that every voice in your group is a part of making your final decision, and that just like every person's individual values found a place, individual interests found a place in their mission statement, so too do they find a place in their grant decisions. Teams go through and make actual grant decisions, and we'll talk, I know you're going to say, where does the money come from? Don't worry, we'll get to that. Teams make real grant decisions and then notify the proposals organizations, whether they received or did not receive. It's important learning that no matter what, you need to be in touch with all of your partners in the field. And finally, we always recommend celebration and sharing as a key close to your program. Whether that's a public opportunity to announce grantees, to celebrate with nonprofits who are doing amazing work, or more of a private reflection opportunity. It's impressive to think about where teams were when they started and to give them the opportunity to reflect not only on what they've accomplished in the past, but what they'll accomplish next. You'll see this isn't a straight line. It doesn't end with celebration and sharing. In fact, we believe that it starts right over again, that this experience shapes a team's understanding of community need, that it may help them to consider differently the values that shape and guide their lives, and that we want to encourage teams to consider what it looks like for them, whether your program is a multi-year program and engages teams year over year in giving, or it's a one-time experience where teams may be charged with thinking about how to take this and own it for the rest of their life. That's the basic cycle that every program goes through. We'll talk about how that might be split up. So earlier I said this program is custom, that every community can make it what they need it to be. I'm sharing with you on the screen 2 different models. One that's designed around 2 to 3 hour monthly sessions for 7 sessions. One that's designed around weekly sessions for about an hour for 15 weeks. What I think that I failed to mention earlier, that we recommend that most programs, in order to get through a huge curriculum arc, dedicate a minimum of 15 hours, although typically programs find that 25 hours of programming time is the sweet spot for getting teams really to be able to engage in conversation, to learn the things they need, the tools, and then to be able to apply them. Most programs say we wish we had more hours dedicated to this initiative. So when you consider how you might break up your 15 to 25 hours, you might think that it's an opportunity to meet monthly, like I said, for 2 to 3 hours a month. You might decide that this fits better in an academic calendar that centers around weekly meetings. Or you might think about what an initiative would look like over the course of an intensive and immersive weekend of giving. All of those are options, and all of those are possibilities for thinking about how you might engage teams in grant making. I'll share that JTFN has resources. So we have a curriculum that is designed around a 15 to 17 week weekly session model, where sessions are 60 to 90 minutes. And we also have curriculum available for you to use that supplement or that might help you to design a program that's centered around monthly sessions. And we're happy to talk through those resources, to share any of them. But what you want to think about in designing your program is, how often will my teams meet? How will these 25 hours be broken up? And how do we make sure to hit all of these milestones in a way that helps teams through the process and gives enough time for you as a facilitator to do the back end work of building nonprofit relationships, of helping to prepare any of the proposals for the teams to be able to go through, for mentoring teams through the process, and of course for preparing for each session. So that is the big picture of what the programs are. We know that this can be broken down in a number of different ways. And as you're thinking about developing and designing and launching your program, I want to name a handful of program considerations for you to consider. In this section, I'm actually just going to raise a lot of questions. I'll give you a few notes, but the reality is that these are all questions that you need to answer on your own. Here at JTFN, we have about 100 programs that we support and have learned amazing best practices from the field. And we know that, again, it's not a one-size-fits all. So what works for one program may not work for another, but we're happy to be partners in answering questions with you. But really, it'll actually be a lot more of you answering the questions and us learning a little bit more about how you operate. So thinking a little bit about program considerations. Earlier I said teams give away money. That's what we do here at JTFN. Teams, through a very thoughtful and strategic process, become grant makers. Where does that money come from? So we know that the grant making pool is a question that is on many, many people's minds as they start a program. Just as a marker for you, we have some programs where teams are able to grant $1,000. We have some programs that we support where teams are able to grant $70,000. It's a huge difference, and we actually believe that the amount of money does not have a huge impact on the experience that teams have. Of course, the amount of money that teams are interested with distributing does have some impact on what kind of proposals you might be considering. And that's something to keep in mind as you decide what your milestone marker for your grant-making pool will be. There are a number of different ways that programs build their grant-making pool. I'll share 3 of them and know that many programs will use a combination of these 3. One way that a grant-making pool is developed is through entrusted funds. An organization, a foundation, an individual may entrust the teams with grant making on their behalf. So that might be a foundation in your community who sets aside a specific amount of money for the teams to grant out of their pot. Or it might be an individual funder or a rabbi with a discretionary fund who helps to seed your pool. We also know that many programs have their grant-making pool developed from team contributions. So teams may pay a fee or might just add in so that they're part of the money. And that's a little bit more like a traditional giving circle, where every member contributes a little bit of money into the grant-making pool. And then many of our team programs have started to engage in fundraising, really getting out into the community and saying, we as a team board care about making a change in X issue in our community. We are going to go through the responsible grant making processes, but we want you to help support our work and encourage family, friends, community members to add to their grant making pool. And like I said, many organizations will actually use a combination of those things. So some combination of somebody contributing, of individual fundraising, or of team contributions. The next thing you'll want to consider are your grant making parameters. Will you as an organization set any parameters for your teams to consider as they make their grant making? The most common parameters that we see placed upon teams is the question of local giving versus global giving, and whether or not your organization might suggest that any specific amount is required to go to Jewish causes versus non-sectarian causes. We also see that this is an interesting opportunity to raise awareness of giving in arts and culture versus social services. These are all questions that teams will and should grapple with, whether or not your organization puts any parameters on their grant making. But as an organization, it's important to consider ahead of time if you have expectations about how teams will give or to where teams will give, that you're upfront from the very beginning. You want to think about who else in your community is a part of your program as a supporter, whether that's coming in as a speaker, somebody in your organization who will go to bat for you, parents, community members, anybody whose voice you can have. The more community stakeholders you have, the more access your teams will have into issues in the community, and of course the longevity of your program. And then finally, thinking a little bit about how to make this experience a seamless Jewish experience. Being the facilitator when it comes to Jewish teaching, you might consider rooting your work in ritual. How does your group come together? How do you end? What's Jewish about being in the space that you're in? Try to incorporate Jewish wisdom throughout your experience rather than just at the beginning in the conversation about Jewish values. Speak about how giving is Jewish all the time, and challenge your teams to consider how they might take this experience with them as a Jewish giver and a Jewish liver for the rest of their lives. Other things that as you're considering building your program that you'll want to have answered is everything from what age specifically is my program serving? Are we serving groups of ages that are mixed grades, so 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders together? Or do we have separate groups for 9th graders, for 10th graders, for 11th graders? Thinking about your minimum number of teams and maximum number of teams. Of course, this program can be run with a small number of teams, but you want to have a robust conversation. You also want to consider that if your group size is getting rather large, you may consider breaking into subcommittees so that your teams have the opportunity to really engage in consensus building and conversation so that you make space for every voice at the table. Those two considerations should drive your recruitment, thinking about what kind of a board do you want to build. And because this program is one that's often complementary and not competitive with other programming in the Jewish teen space, I recommend that you build partnerships with existing communities, with existing groups, and figure out how you want to place your program in the marketplace. Really keying into what your program goals are from the very beginning, at the beginning of the conversation, will also help you with your recruitment. We spoke about consensus building being an ultimate part of building your program, and that's true. And that starts with building a cohesive board, building relationships among your teams. There are several potential pain points in the grant making process, but if you do the work of developing relationships among your group early, you'll find moments that are productive and you'll create healthy disagreement rather than disdainful. And then finally, consider learning styles. And every time that your group comes together, you have the opportunity to make this program truly accessible for teams of all backgrounds and for teams of all learning styles. So we find that the best mix of team philanthropy is finding opportunities to have small groups, large groups, people coming in as speakers, interactive programs that when learning is paired with doing at every step of the process, the program is more engaging. We have a number of resources, and I'll share how to access those, but we encourage you to consider what learning style works for you as a facilitator and how might you access the styles of your teams, and know that the group may change and shift over time as it becomes more or less comfortable. So there's a lot of questions, a lot of things that you should think about as you get your program started. And it's not totally exhaustive, but answering those questions, considering those different categories, making sure that your program has goals and has a set plan for what happens every time your teams come together, that will help you to launch your program. It will help you to feel confident as a facilitator of the program. So what now? There are a number of things I want to make sure you know before we leave the call. One is that, as I shared at the beginning, JTFN is a resource for you. We encourage you to connect with us, to follow us on Facebook. We have a page. If you are a facilitator or an educator in the Jewish teen philanthropy space, there is a specific private Facebook group just for you, for us, for all of us to share resources, to ask questions. It's called Jewish Teen Philanthropy Professionals and Educators. Search it and we'll go ahead and add you into that group so that you can be a part of the conversation. And like I said at the beginning, the JTFN team is here to be of use to you. And that means that as you develop your individualized program, we're here for you to schedule a consultation, to ask your questions, to consider to brainstorm with us. We have a number of resources or people in the field that we're happy to connect you to. But please reach out to us and schedule a consultation so we can hear how you're thinking about your program. Finally, or next, you can learn with peers. Sign up for communities of practice or mentoring. We have that sign up. We're hoping to launch our first rounds with sign-ups concluding at the end of this week. But of course, always indicate your interest and we'll see what we can do to get you into a group. And then keep your eye out for fall learning opportunities. We'll do a number of webinars, and the JTFN team will be out on the road. So if we happen to be in the same place as you, we'd love to meet up. Finally, launch your program. Just do it. So make those final decisions. Just get going. But when you do, make sure to be in touch with us. Our goal, our role here at JTFN is to support, to strengthen, and to grow the whole field of Jewish teen philanthropy. We can only do that when we know that programs exist, we know who's running them, and we can learn more about how to support them. So everything that we learn about your program helps us to better support you, helps us to better connect people, and hopefully once you're off the ground running, you can be a resource to others in our community. So when you do launch your program, please reach out to us and let us know so we can get you onto our network. I'll close the recording part of the webinar with just sharing our contact information so that you can be in touch with us. Again, my name is Briana and I'm the director of the Jewish Teen Funders Network. You heard from Danielle and from Alana, and we're here to support you. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us to ask questions and to learn together with us and to help us to strengthen the field. I'm going to go ahead and leave this up, ask Danielle to stop the recording for us.